For over 40 years, my family's farm was my whole world. 3,500 acres of rolling hills, ancient oaks, and memories etched into every square inch. It wasn't just land, it was our legacy, passed down through generations. My great-grandfather bought it, my grandfather expanded it, and my father taught me how to work it. We never bothered with the new housing development that sprang up next door, or their fussy little homeowners association. We were there first. We were agricultural land, exempt from their rules. Or so I thought. The letter that arrived one Tuesday morning felt like a joke, a foreclosure notice, not from a bank, but from the HOA. I laughed at first. It had to be a mistake. They claimed I owed thousands in unpaid dues and fines. Fines for what? My grass being too long, my barn not being the right shade of beige, I called them, expecting a quick apology and a correction. Instead, I got Karen. That wasn't her real name, of course, but she was the quintessential HOA president, smug, condescending, and utterly convinced of her own power. She informed me that when the county lines were redrawn a few years back, a tiny, forgotten sliver of my property, less than a quarter of an acre, technically fell within their development's jurisdiction, and according to their bylaws that made my entire 3,500-acre property subject to their rules and their fees. They had been sending notices, she chirped, to a P.O. box I hadn't used in 20 years, the one listed on some ancient county plat map. They knew my real address. They saw me drive past their perfect little cookie-cutter houses every single day. This wasn't an oversight, it was a setup. I told her it was absurd, that I was zoned agricultural, and that I'd see them in court. She just laughed. The auction is in 30 days, she said. Better start packing. Panic set in. I hired a lawyer, a good one, but the legal system moves at a glacial pace. We filed injunctions, motions, everything we could, but the HOA had been planning this for years. They used every dirty trick to delay and obstruct. They wanted my land. A developer was already lined up, ready to turn my family's legacy into the estates at Oak Creek or some other soulless name. The day of the auction was the worst day of my life. I stood there, helpless, as my entire world was sold for pennies on the dollar to a smirking developer, with Karen and the whole HOA board looking on like they'd just won the Super Bowl. They literally high-fived each other. The sheriff served me the eviction notice the next day. I had 1 week to vacate the only home I had ever known. Those first few nights, sleeping on a friend's couch, were pure agony. Rage and despair were all I had. I replayed that auction in my head 1,000 times, the smug looks on their faces. I wanted revenge, not just any revenge. I wanted to dismantle their entire perfect little world, just like they had dismantled mine, and I wanted to do it legally. I spent my days in the county law library, fueled by cheap coffee and pure spite. I read every line of the HOA's covenants, conditions, and restrictions. I read state property laws, corporate filing statutes, everything. For weeks I found nothing, just ironclad rules designed to protect the board. But then, late one night, I found it. A tiny, beautiful loophole. It was hidden in a section about corporate governance. The HOA was registered as a non-profit corporation in the state, and according to state law, if a corporation failed to hold its mandated annual meetings and file the proper minutes for 3 consecutive years, any member in good standing could petition a court to be appointed as the receiver to manage the corporation's affairs and dissolve its assets. My heart was pounding. I drove back to the county records office first thing in the morning. I pulled the HOA's file, and there it was, or rather, there it wasn't. They had filed their initial articles of incorporation a decade ago, but in the last 4 years, nothing. No annual meeting minutes, no updated board member lists, no financial disclosures. They had been so busy writing tickets for unapproved garden gnomes that they forgot to do the basic paperwork to keep their little kingdom legal. They were a ghost ship, and I was about to become its captain. The next step was to become a member in good standing. That was tricky since they had just taken my property. But remember that tiny sliver of land that started this whole mess. The developer who bought my farm had no interest in that quarter-acre strip. It was an awkward, useless piece of land. To him, it was a rounding error. To me, it was the key. I found a way to buy it back through a third party for a few $100s. The moment the deed was in my name, I paid the back dues they claimed I owed on that specific parcel. Boom, I was a member in good standing of the very HOA that had destroyed my life. I filed a petition with the court immediately. My lawyer, who had been skeptical at first, was now grinning from ear to ear. The case was a slam dunk. The HOA didn't even bother to fight it properly. They sent Karen, who tried to argue with the judge like she argued with homeowners about mailbox colors. The judge was not impressed. He looked at the evidence and, in a hearing that lasted less than 15 minutes, he appointed me as the sole receiver for the HOA. I had been given absolute authority over all its assets. And what is an HOA's primary asset? The properties it governs. The first thing I did with my new power was call a special meeting. The entire board was there, Karen front and center, looking confused and angry. They thought they could just vote me out. I let them ramble for a bit before I stood up and had my lawyer explain the situation. The color drained from their faces as they realized what had happened. I wasn't just a new board member. I was their king, their dictator, and their executioner. all rolled into one. And the court had given me the sword. As receiver, I announced, my primary duty is to dissolve this corporation and liquidate its assets to satisfy its outstanding liabilities. I had, of course, found a few liabilities, like the massive legal bill I incurred fighting their illegal foreclosure, and a very, very large consulting fee for my time spent correcting their years of mismanagement. What assets? Karen stammered. I just smiled. All of them, according to the same bylaws they used against me. The HOA had the authority to place liens on properties for unpaid dues. As the new HOA, I had the authority to call all debts due immediately, and I also had the authority to set the fees. So I called an emergency vote, which I was the only person eligible to vote in. I voted to impose a one-time special assessment fee on every single member of the HOA, a capital improvement fee to cover the dissolution costs. The fee was set at a nice, round number, roughly the market value of each of their houses. The fee was due in 24 hours. When, inevitably, no one could pay it, I followed their own procedures perfectly. I placed a lien on every single house in that development, all 150 of them, and then I scheduled an auction. A bulk auction. This time, I wasn't the one standing helplessly in the crowd. I was the one holding the gavel. I stood on the steps of the community clubhouse, looking at the same stunned, horrified faces that had watched me lose my farm. Karen was in the front row, openly weeping. I sold every single one of their houses, all of them to a new developer, the very same one who had bought my farm. He was more than happy to acquire the entire neighborhood for a fraction of its value, and he already had the plans to tear it all down and build something new. They had 30 days to vacate it. The irony was so thick you could taste it. They tried to sue, of course, but they were suing a corporation that no longer existed, based on the authority of bylaws that I, as the receiver, had legally dissolved. They had nothing. I used the proceeds from the auction to pay off the liabilities, which included paying myself back every penny. Then, with the rest of the money, I went to the developer and I bought my farm back. Every last acre. The day the moving vans rolled into their neighborhood to haul their lives away, I was sitting on my front porch, right where I belonged. I watched the sun set over my hills, my fields, my home. They thought they could destroy me with their petty rules and their pathetic little kingdom. But they forgot one thing. You don't mess with a man's legacy. You don't mess with his land. And if you do, you better be sure you filed your paperwork. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more tales of justice.